Well, hello and welcome. After the Battle of Midway in June of 1942, we would no longer be on the defensive in the Pacific. We would go on the offensive. And the first place to begin that offense, I'm going to play with my new Fisher pen, so don't mind me, would be in the Solomon Islands, which was north of Australia. The reason being because we didn't want Australia to be invaded or threatened to be invaded, and we had to decide where we were going to do our first landing in a strategy of island hopping, and it was the Solomon Islands, which would be Guadalcanal and Tulagi. And that occurred on August 7th, 1942, when the 1st Marine Division laid down and invaded the island, basically unopposed. The reason for Guadalcanal is the Japanese were building an airfield on it and were almost complete. They wanted to capture that airfield, which they did, and renamed that airfield Henderson Field after Major Lofton R. Henderson, a Marine dive bomber pilot who died in the Battle of Midway. When the first wave attackers, I believe he was on the island. But we had plane space there. Initially, we had F-4F Wildcats and P-39 Airacobras, which I don't have one handy to show. But both of those planes are being pursued in shooting to pieces by this. The Mitsubishi A6M20. Basically, it's the same plane that flew into Pearl Harbor, the same plane that was at Midway at Coral Sea. It was an amazing plane when it came out. If you look at it close up, I'm not retracting landing gear on these are 21st century toy versions, collectibles, ones I used to have, and it is a pain to keep it up and in. I might do it on the Zero at the end just to show you how they work with these, but this would be the plane that would have been over there fighting. Speed wise, 331 miles per hour, 15,000. 336 is actually top speed at altitude. It has a Nakajima Saki 12 925 horsepower radial engine. This plane was amazing for what it could do in a slow turning dogfight maneuverability. It would kill you. It had two 7.7 millimeter machine guns. And let's see if you could see them on the inside. You actually could see them on this. Let's see if I can get close enough. And I apologize. I'm coming up with another format for doing these videos, but I'm going to play with it this weekend and figure it out. You can see they're probably pretty good in this one too. These were wonderful when these came out. I would buy these at Walmart for $15 each, which is kind of expensive, but they were cool to have. And I cleaned this one up considerably. A lot of dust and stuff on it, but it was a great plane. Air-cooled radial engine, no pilot protection, meaning no armor and no self-sealing fuel tanks. What a self-sealing fuel tank does, if you hit it, it'll seal so they won't catch fire and rupture. The Japanese didn't believe in that. Also, they had no protection for the pilot, and sometimes the pilots didn't have parachutes. Was it stupidity? No, because this is a very advanced plane, which I'll get into in a second. But they had the samurai spirit. They would fight for the emperor and blah, 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 blah. Hence, a lot of them died needlessly. But besides the two 7.7, it had two 20 millimeter cannon, my hand, in the wings. If you look at the wings in the yellow section. And it was a great plane. It can outmaneuver anything that we had. The Wildcat had a chance against it if it did the thatch weave, which is two planes doing a circle around each other. They call it the beam defense. So if the Zero takes one plane, the other plane is going to come after the Zero to shoot him down. And a Wildcat had armor plating, similar speed but not maneuverability, but it was quick, fast. It could dive faster, it could get away, and it had armor plating. It had 4 to 650 caliber Browning machine guns, which would turn this thing into a flaming wreck. Okay, so Wildcats and P-40s and P-39s, I forgot to mention P-40s, were fighting this. And the Air Force was called the Cactus Air Force because it was Army, Navy, Marine pilots. So we proceed to 1943. 1943, the United States Navy was playing with this. This is the F4U Corsair. This one is the actual one from that time period, 1943, not the bigger one with the slanted nose, and a four-bladed propeller and a larger engine, but it's the actual one the Marine Corps used. Now, this one here, I did not pull landing gear out because it was falling apart. Like I mentioned in another video, the doors for the landing gear are funky, and to get the wings to stay locked are funky. But you can see a lot of detail on this one. Um, Also, I actually get the pilot figure out so you can see what one of these pilots look like. You've seen me have these videos before, but never was able to get a pilot out and show you. And here you go. Look at the detail on that. They did a good job with these. This is 1/32nd scale. Couldn't move, but he sat on his butt with his parachute. Now put him back in the plane. And the problem with the Corsair, that would be at this point, it was very difficult to land on an aircraft carrier. In fact, they called it, it's falling apart right now, excuse me, the ensign eliminator. Why they called it that? Because a lot of unskilled pilots died trying to land this on an aircraft carrier. It did not do well. It would bounce, and vision was a problem. So it was handed off to the Marines. So what did the Marines get when this was handed off to them? Well, they had a plane that had a very powerful Pratt & Whitney R2800 2,000 horsepower radial engine. Speed at combat height 19,900 feet 417. Speed at ceiling 425 426. And this plane was a wicked plane because it was almost 100 miles per hour faster than the Zero. Bigger, heavier, so you would not want to get it into a dogfight where you were doing turns. Because if you did this in a turning dogfight, you would get shot down, or your plane would get badly damaged. And the Corsair is a much more durable plane than the Zero. What the Corsair did was they would do what they would call boom and zoom energy attacks. What an energy attack is, the Corsair would get up at a very high altitude. It would see the Zeros down below them, and they could literally see them because the early versions of the Corsair, do you see that, had a piece of glass. Why do they have a piece of glass? They didn't have floors in them. They just had pedals, and so they put that piece of glass down there basically so the Marine pilots could see below them, which is how they were able to use this plane tactically and just basically dictate the terms of combat to the Japanese. Well, the Zero is a king of maneuver. It could turn tight. It could do all kind of stuff. It could even get on the tail of the Corsair if it was a slow dogfight. But if you open this baby up, the Corsair, and use its potential speed, armor, and its 650 caliber machine guns, which you could see in the wings, you would literally obliterate the Japanese planes. So picture this coming diving out of the sky at a good diving speed on a Zero. The Zero could not get away. It was coming at him faster, and the Zero had problems with its controls freezing up in a dive. All you had to do was get your target sighted on this plane, and you turn it into a flaming wreck. And this happened quite a bit. It happened so much that we got air superiority over the Solomon Islands. More Corsairs came in, and more battles were waged. What happened was when the American pilots became an ace, they sent them stateside so they could help train other pilots. The Japanese, basically, their pilots fly until they die in combat. A few notables survived. The most notable is Saburo Sakai. He lived a long time. He flew the Zero and wrote a couple books. And interesting, his perspective of aircraft and basically fighting. And it was this plane here, the first plane that the Japanese encountered. The P-38 to some extent, but this one that really chewed them up and spit them out. It made its debut in February of 1943 in Guadalcanal, flying off of Henderson Field, going after the Japanese. And that basically started to go along with the turn of the tide in the Pacific, with us going the offensive with the superiority of our equipment against the Japanese equipment, and how the Japanese couldn't come up. Stay equal because we could mass produce these. And there are a lot of problems with this version of the Corsair, like I said, because of it being raw. It got added the bubble canopy, has a bubble canopy on it, and it's if I had the Kobe one here, it'd show you. The Kobe one is a more refined version, more horsepower. The engine, it's more of a slant, so they could see the carrier deck better when they land. And that was a problem because the nose was so long in the Corsair, it was hard to judge where the deck was when you were going to land, and it had a tendency to bounce a little bit and stuff. So once they figured out how to land this, the British figured out a way to do it. They started to make them carrier qualified and put them out of carriers because basically, and then they also had a floor in them. They were modified and stuff, and the production on them was a little bit different. The reason they didn't have a floor on the initial ones, they were trying to speed up production and send these out into the Pacific. They could carry fuel tanks in the bottom, and range-wise of fuel tanks, they could keep up with the Zero. The Zero had phenomenal range because of its lightness, but with fuel tanks, this baby was the first one to be able to go long range and destroy the Zero. The next one had been the P-38 twin engine Lightning. I don't have one in 132nd scale. I have it in 118 scale. I could maybe do a video on that, but basically that's how the war started. If you would go and do the boom and zoom energy tactics like they use in China, Claire Chenault and the Flying Tigers did, and apply it with superior aircraft like this, you turn the tide eventually, and that's what happened. The Japanese could not keep up production-wise or with the quality of their pilots to be able to go and counter the increasing skill level the American pilots picked up, such as the Marine pilots on the islands. And that'd be the norm for the whole Pacific campaign of island hopping. You'd see the Corsair more and more, basically starting with the Marines, and then once the Navy got them, I mean, not. It's a struggle. I'm trying to come up with the best words, but basically outclassed, outsped by 100 over 100 miles an hour more, and just a better plane, I guess. But when this came out in 1940, it was superb. It survived, like I say, 1943, where it started to get outclassed by planes like the Corsair, and because of the way we were able to produce, we outproduced them, and that's history. I would like to show you the landing gear on the Zero. The Corsair is way too difficult. It would probably plane would fall apart. But on the Zero, I think I could pull one of them down. Yeah, I can. Maybe not. Oh yeah, I'm going to. If I can get this. Oh, here it comes. I'll pull one of them down, but see, it's the landing gear in this is pretty good. In fact, I'm not going to let this one go into plain limbo. I'm going to keep it upstairs on the shelf and keep it clean. It's a nice plane. And I'll keep the Corsair there too, and to preserve it from getting beaten. But the landing gear goes up nice and easy. In the slot, and the door closes. And this is the main version of the Zero. They did an upgraded version with a stronger engine. It boosted the speed up to 351 miles an hour, but still not fast enough to go. They added armor to it, so it started to lose its maneuverability, and basically, that was it. So that's it for this video. I've got another Quan Guan model, my first tank. I have a T-3476, a 1940-41 model. This will be the one that appeared at the beginning of the war. As soon as that's built, I will do a video on that, and I may do one on the P-38. That one, you have to be patient with me. It's a very large plane, and well, you'll see. And once again, I was using a Fisher space pen. It was the AG7 model titanium nitride. I just got this a while ago. But with all the craziness of the tariffs and the trade wars, this is one of the only American-made pens. They're not cheap, like $100 for these. It's a titanium nitride finish on it, but you can get refills here, and it's made here. And if you ever desire to go and buy a nice ballpoint pen, check them out. Fisher's, made in the United States, refills too, and superb. I have a bunch of them, and I like them. Anyway, not to get off the subject there, hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you didn't think my glasses were too goofy, and hope my hair looked okay. And I will be getting another video on the way this weekend. So thank you once again, and enjoy, and goodbye.